Hello everybody! If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short story 623, The Empty Pocket. Intermediate. Arthur lived a life of quiet routine, a comfortable rhythm built over 82 years. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd walk to the village high street, a gentle half-mile stroll, to collect his pension and buy a few essentials. His wallet, a worn leather square his late wife had given him, was always in his inside jacket pocket. His watch, a sturdy no-frills model, was fastened securely on his wrist, a constant ticking companion. And his phone, a simple old Nokia, was always in his hand, ready to call his daughter if he needed her. This Tuesday was no different. The sun was warm, the air still. Arthur hummed a tune he couldn't quite name as he walked past the bakery. He was thinking of the loaf of bread he would buy, when a young lad, no more than 20, stepped out from a small alleyway. He wasn't big, but the knife in his hand seemed to grow in the quiet air. "Give me your wallet, old man, and your watch, and your phone." The words were cold and hard. Arthur felt his heart jolt, a sudden, panicked thump. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. He slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out the wallet. The lad snatched it, then roughly grabbed his arm and unfastened the watch. Arthur felt a moment of pure indignity as the young man took his phone too. Then, as quickly as he appeared, the lad was gone, melting back into the shadows of the alley. Arthur stood there for a long time, the sun still shining, the birds still singing, but the world felt different now, empty. He finally made it home, his legs feeling heavy, his chest tight. He sat in his chair, the silence of the house louder than before. He didn't tell his daughter, afraid of worrying her. In the days that followed, the robbery played on a constant loop in his mind. He found himself jumping at sudden noises, glancing over his shoulder on his walks, even inside his own home. He stopped going out. The once familiar walk to the high street now felt like a terrifying journey. The village, his home for 6 decades, no longer felt safe. He missed his watch, not just for the time, but for the weight of it, the feeling of it on his wrist. And the wallet, so much more than just a place for money. It had contained a photo of his wife, a small, faded picture he had carried for 40 years. He tried to go out one afternoon to buy some milk, but as he stood by his front door, his hand on the handle, a sudden, overwhelming fear washed over him. His heart began to pound, his palms sweated. He felt a wave of dizziness and had to sit down. He couldn't do it. A few weeks later, his daughter, worried about his silence, came to visit. She found him in his armchair, a thin and drawn version of the man she knew. The house was cold. He eventually told her what had happened, the words coming out in a rush of shame and grief. She listened quietly, holding his hand, her own eyes filling with tears. She arranged for a new phone, a new wallet, even a new watch. But these things felt foreign and cold. They were not his. He was still caught in the loop of that afternoon, the feeling of the blade, the emptiness of his pockets. His daughter refused to leave him alone. She started taking him to a support group for victims of crime. At first, Arthur sat in silence, listening to the stories of others who had been through similar things. They talked about trust, about fear, and about how to reclaim their lives. One day, an old woman spoke about how she had been robbed for her wedding ring. She said she felt she had lost a part of herself, but then she said something that made Arthur look up. She said she realized that the memories, the love, and the person she was were not in a ring or a wallet or a watch. They were inside her, safe forever. The words resonated with him. He started to see the robbery not as something that had taken away a part of him, but as an experience that had revealed something he still had. He still had his memories, his courage, his daughter. The things that truly mattered were still with him. He began to venture out again, first with his daughter, and then, a little at a time, on his own. The fear was still there, a whisper in the back of his mind, but he learned to live with it, to walk alongside it. He bought a new wallet, a simple brown leather one, and he put a new, smiling photo of his wife inside. He knew that the world was still a dangerous place, but he also knew that he was more than the things he owned. He was Arthur, a man of quiet routine and courage, and he was not defined by what had been taken from him, but by what he had found. Vocabulary notes. Routine. Meaning, a routine is a sequence of actions regularly followed. It's a set of habits or a fixed program of things you do. Example. Arthur lived a life of quiet routine, a comfortable rhythm built over 82 years. Similar words. Habit, custom, pattern, schedule, ritual. Example sentence. My morning routine is to wake up, make a cup of tea, and read the news. Jolt. Meaning. To jolt means to give a sudden, rough movement or shock to something. In the story, it describes a sudden, shocking feeling. Example. Arthur felt his heart jolt, a sudden, panicked thump. Similar words. Shock, surprise, startle, jerk. Example sentence. The loud bang made me jolt in my seat. Indignity. Meaning, indignity is a situation that makes you feel embarrassed, ashamed, or foolish because of how you have been treated. Example. Arthur felt a moment of pure indignity as the young man took his phone too. Similar words. Humiliation, shame, disgrace, dishonor. Example sentence. Having to ask for money for my family was a great indignity. Resonated. Meaning, when something resonates with you, it has a special meaning or emotional impact on you. It connects with your own feelings or experiences. Example. The words resonated with him. He started to see the robbery not as something that had taken away a part of him. Similar words. Connected, echoed, related to, struck a chord. Example sentence. The character's struggle in the film resonated with my own personal experiences. Venture. Meaning. To venture means to go somewhere that might be dangerous or unfamiliar. In the story, it describes Arthur's first attempts to go outside again. Example. He began to venture out again, first with his daughter, and then, a little at a time, on his own. Similar words. Dare, brave, go forth, journey, set out. Example sentence. They decided to venture into the dark cave, even though they were a little scared. Story written by Gemini Pro AI. Image created by 1min AI. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack your sources to find those nuggets of insight that truly help you become well-informed. Today, we're taking a deep dive into just one source, but it's an incredibly compelling short story called The Empty Pocket. It's a powerful narrative that doesn't just tell us what happens when a life is suddenly shattered. It really delves into how one man navigates vulnerability, the insidious grip of trauma, and ultimately finds a profound path to resilience. So our mission for this deep dive: to understand the immense psychological impact of a sudden, violent event on an individual's sense of self, their security, and then trace the intricate steps this one man takes to reclaim his world.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating about The Empty Pocket is how, despite being quite short, it offers such a rich and nuanced exploration of human psychology when facing, well, absolute adversity. It's really a masterclass in connecting those dots between external shattering events and our internal worlds. It forces us, I think, to confront how we cope, or maybe fail to cope, when those worlds are just unexpectedly turned upside down. I think for many of us listening, this story will resonate with a deeper understanding of what, true security really means.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our story introduces us to Arthur. He's 82 years old, living what the story describes as a life of quiet routine. And you immediately get the sense of a comfortable, deeply established rhythm, something he's meticulously built and lived within for decades. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he has this gentle, familiar half-mile stroll to the village high street. It's not just a walk, it's a kind of ritual. He collects his pension, buys a few essentials, and he has his cherished items, almost like totems of his routine. His worn leather wallet, a gift from his late wife, always in his inside jacket pocket. His sturdy no-frills watch, described as a constant ticking companion on his wrist. And his simple old Nokia phone, always in his hand, ready to call his daughter if needed. This isn't just about objects, is it? It's about a whole way of life.
Absolutely. That concept of routine here is far more crucial than it might seem at first glance. It's not simply about repetition or habit. It's about a deeply ingrained sense of predictability, comfort, and, most importantly, that psychological safety Arthur has so carefully constructed and relied upon for, decades. So when something so deeply woven into the very fabric of his daily existence is suddenly violently interrupted, the psychological impact is just immense. It's not just a change in plans. It's the disruption of an entire world, a deeply felt sense of order. What do you think, just from the story's details, what's the most jarring aspect of this settled life being so abruptly fractured?
That's a really good question, because the story really does amplify that contrast. It's the sheer ordinariness of the moment right before the rupture. It's a sunny Tuesday. Arthur's humming some nameless tune, thinking about maybe buying a loaf of bread, just completely at peace. And then bang, everything shifts. A young lad, no more than 20, steps out from a small alleyway. The story notes he isn't particularly big, but the knife in his hand seemed to grow in the quiet air. The words he speaks are described as cold and hard. "Give me your wallet, old man, and your watch, and your phone." Arthur's heart, it says, jolts. Just a sudden panicked thump. He's rendered utterly speechless. He slowly reaches into his jacket, pulls out the wallet. It's snatched. His arm is roughly grabbed for the watch, unfastened, and his phone is taken too. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, the lad is gone, melting back into the shadows of the alley. It's not just the suddenness, it's the complete violation, isn't it, of his personal space, his autonomy, in a moment he least expects.
You've highlighted something absolutely vital there, that feeling of a jolt. It perfectly captures that sudden involuntary physiological shock, the immediate fight or flight response that completely shatters his calm state. And the description of pure indignity when his phone is taken, that's particularly insightful. It's not just the loss of the physical items themselves, which sure, they're valuable, but it's the profound violation of self. It's that feeling of absolute powerlessness, of being stripped of control and autonomy and experiencing deep humiliation. This moment isn't merely a robbery. It's a traumatic assault on his personal space, his very personhood. It tears at his dignity, his sense of security in the world. This is the kind of event that doesn't just take possessions. It feels like it attempts to take a piece of who you are.
And that attempt, that feeling, it clearly lands hard. Arthur is just left standing there for a long time. The sun is still shining, birds are still singing, but the story tells us the world felt different now. Empty, wondering. He eventually makes it home, his legs feeling heavy, his chest tight, but the silence of the house is louder than before. And in a detail that really underscores his immediate emotional struggle, he doesn't tell his daughter. He's afraid of worrying her. What's going on here psychologically? This isn't just sadness, is it? It feels like more.
No, definitely not just sadness. This immediate sense of emptiness, this profound alteration of the world, even though the physical surroundings haven't changed, that's a classic response to trauma. It's a phenomenon sometimes called derealization, where the world around you suddenly feels unreal or foreign. It really highlights how much our perception of safety, of meaning, of reality itself is profoundly tied to our internal state. The objects taken, while maybe seeming mundane to an outsider, carried immense emotional and historical weight for Arthur. Their loss creates this palpable void. And his decision not to tell his daughter, that also speaks volumes. It's often driven by a sense of shame, perhaps, or a desire to protect loved ones, but it can also be a form of self-isolation. That's a common coping mechanism, though often not a helpful one, right after a deeply humiliating event like this.
Right, and that's really the key, isn't it? It wasn't just about the money in the wallet or the practical use of the phone or watch. You remember the wallet contained that Small, faded picture of his wife, a photograph he'd carried for 40 years. 40 years. The watch wasn't just for telling time, but for the weight of it, the feeling of it on his wrist. These weren't just possessions, they were like extensions of his identity, anchors to his past, tangible links to his most cherished memories and his ongoing connections. When something like that is ripped away, it's not just an item lost, it's much more fundamental.
Precisely. For Arthur, these weren't merely possessions. They were relics of a lifetime, deeply imbued with memories, emotional significance, a continuous sense of self. The wallet, for instance, held not just money, but a tangible piece of his marital history. The watch represented not just time, but the passage of time, enduring loyalty, the, tactile comfort of routine. Losing them, especially his late wife's photo, isn't just a financial setback. It's like a theft of his personal history. It's a direct assault on his most intimate connection to loved ones. It profoundly contributes to that feeling that a part of himself has been lost, a feeling that goes far beyond the material. It's a symbolic dismantling almost of his personal narrative, his identity.
And that feeling of dismantling, it clearly doesn't just, disappear. In the days and weeks that followed, the robbery played on a constant loop in his mind. He became hypervigilant, jumping at sudden noises, glancing over his shoulder, even inside his own home, which is striking. The once familiar walk to the high street, which he'd done for 60 years, became a terrifying journey. He stopped going out entirely. He even tried to venture out one afternoon just to buy some milk. But as he stood by his front door, hand on the handle, he was hit by sudden, overwhelming fear. His heart began to pound, his palms sweated, he felt dizzy, had to sit down. He simply couldn't do it. This isn't just grief over loss anymore. This sounds like something far more entrenched, right?
Oh, absolutely. You've perfectly captured the progression here. This is post-traumatic stress. What you're describing are classic, often debilitating symptoms of what we commonly refer to as PTSD. Let's break this down a bit. Intrusive thoughts playing on a loop. Those are unwanted, involuntary memories of the traumatic event. They can feel as real and terrifying as if it's happening again. Then there's the hyperarousal and hypervigilance, that persistent state of being on high alert. Your body's fight or flight system is just constantly activated.
Right.
That leads to jumping at noises, difficulty relaxing, that constant scanning of his surroundings, even where he should feel safest, in his own home. And the avoidance behavior, stopping his walks, being unable to leave the house, that isn't just consciously choosing not to go out. It's often an unconscious coping mechanism to prevent re-experiencing that intense fear and emotional pain linked to the trauma.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And finally, that sudden overwhelming fear, the pounding heart, sweating, dizziness, that's a full-blown panic attack. A physiological cascade triggered by the perceived threat of just leaving his home. The world, which was once safe and predictable for him, has been entirely rewired in his mind as a constant, unpredictable threat. The very act of venturing outside, just a simple, everyday task, becomes this monumental, terrifying challenge because his nervous system is constantly anticipating danger.
Wow. It paints such a clear, stark picture of how trauma can completely hijack your life. So his daughter, worried by his silence, eventually came to visit him a few weeks later, found him thin and drawn. He finally told her what had happened, the words sort of rushing out in shame and grief. She listened quietly, held his hand, and then arranged for new items, a new phone, a new wallet, even a new watch. Very practical, very loving. But the story tells us these felt foreign and cold. They were not his. Why aren't these well-meaning replacements enough? What's still missing?
That's such a crucial and deeply insightful detail in the story. The new items don't immediately bring comfort or a sense of restoration. While her intentions were clearly loving, absolutely well-meaning, material replacements just can't instantly heal a deep emotional wound like this. The original items weren't just functional objects. They were infused with a lifetime of memories, a sense of continuity, a strong connection to his past identity. They were part of his self-narrative.
Right.
The new ones, lacking that history, lacking that deep emotional connection, feel alien precisely because they highlight the absence of what was lost rather than alleviating it. They're shiny new objects that kind of underscore the void rather than filling it. What's truly missing is the emotional significance, those intangible threads that connect objects to identity and memory.
So, if new objects can't replace that deep emotional loss, what does this mean for finding a way forward? His daughter, refusing to leave him alone in his isolation, starts taking him to a support group for victims of crime. At first, Arthur just sits there in silence, listening to the stories of others. What's the power of a setting like that, especially when someone like Arthur is so withdrawn?
Well, this is where the power of community and shared experience becomes incredibly potent, potentially transformative. For someone like Arthur, who's been consumed by shame and isolation, just being in a room with others who understand without him having to explain or justify his feelings, that's a monumental first step. Listening to others who have been through similar violating experiences validates one's own intense feelings of fear, shame, grief. It helps to normalize the overwhelming response to trauma. It shows him he's not alone, that his reactions aren't unusual or some sign of weakness. This shared vulnerability begins to build a crucial sense of solidarity and understanding, which can be the first crack in that wall of isolation that trauma often builds.
And then, in that support group, one day, something shifts for Arthur. A real turning point. An old woman shares her story of being robbed of her wedding ring. She felt she'd lost a part of herself. It sounds familiar, but then she says something that makes Arthur look up, something that truly resonates with him. She says, she realized that the memories, the love, and the person she was were not in a ring or a wallet or a watch. They were inside her, safe forever.
This sounds like the pivotal aha moment. What's happening here internally for Arthur?
This is the pivotal aha moment. It's a profound cognitive shift, and it's absolutely critical in the healing process. What the woman is articulating there is a powerful act of cognitive reframing. She's distinguishing between external possessions and her internal essence.
For Arthur, who's been, perhaps unconsciously, equating the loss of his items with the loss of himself, her words offer a new, transformative framework. It's the profound insight that identity, love, our core self, our courage, our memories, these things are not external possessions that can be taken or stolen. They are internal qualities that endure, regardless of external circumstances. Her words resonated with him because they offered a concrete path out of that feeling of utter loss and emptiness. It showed him that what truly defines him is actually untouchable. It's a shift from an external locus of control, really, to an internal one.
So he starts to see the robbery not as something that had taken away a part of him, but as an experience that had revealed something he still had. He still had his memories, his courage, his daughter. The things that truly mattered were still with him. That's such a powerful reversal of perspective.
It absolutely is. And this is the very essence of resilience, isn't it? The ability to adapt and grow, to not just survive, but maybe even thrive in the face of profound adversity. It's not about erasing the trauma or pretending it didn't happen. That's usually impossible. But it's about actively reframing it, finding new meaning, and rediscovering those internal strengths and resources. Strengths we often forget we possess until they are severely tested. Arthur's shift is about realizing that while the event was deeply traumatic, it didn't diminish his inherent worth or his capacity for love and connection. In fact, in a way, it highlighted what couldn't be taken. It's a recognition of personal agency, even after experiencing something so disempowering.
And with this new understanding, he began to venture out again. First with his daughter by his side, providing that safety net, and then a little at a time on his own. The fear was still there, described as a whisper in the back of his mind, but he learned to live with it, to walk alongside it. And then, in what I think is just a truly beautiful and understated detail, he buys a new wallet. A simple brown leather one. And he puts a new smiling photo of his wife inside. Not the old faded one he lost, but a new one. What does that final act signify for his journey?
Oh, that new photo is incredibly significant, isn't it? It shows us so powerfully that healing isn't about the complete absence of fear or the, erasure of the past. It's about developing coping mechanisms, reclaiming agency, and finding the courage to move forward despite that lingering presence of trauma. The fear, as the story notes, becomes a whisper, not a scream that paralyzes him anymore. And that new photo, it's not a desperate attempt to replicate the past exactly as it was, to pretend the theft never happened. That would be denial. Instead, it's a profound acceptance of the present and a forward-looking embrace of cherished memories. He's not defined by what was taken, but by what he chooses to hold on to, what he rebuilds, and how he decides to live. He's carrying his love for his wife forward in a new way. It's an active, living memory, not just a fragile relic from the past. It's a symbol of active recovery and integration, not just passive endurance.
Arthur's story is just such a profound deep dive into how our deeply ingrained routines, our very sense of security, can be shattered in an instant. It illustrates how material losses can represent so much more than mere objects, reaching right into the core of our identity. And critically, it shows how the path back is often found not through external replacement, but through inner revelation, through that transformative moment of reframing and, well, the quiet courage to venture forward again. He realized he was more than the things he owned, a man not defined by what had been taken from him, but by what he had found within.
And this story ultimately leaves us with a truly important question to ponder, something I think for all of us to consider. In a world where we so often define ourselves by our possessions, our roles, our external circumstances, our jobs, our social status, our achievements, What truly constitutes you? What is it that no external force, no theft, no act of violence, no sudden reversal of fortune can ever truly take away? It's a powerful reminder, I think, that our most valuable assets are often invisible, residing deep within us, just waiting to be rediscovered, especially in tough times.